The Song of the World Tree. Before there were days, there was a deep quiet. It wasn't dark, because there was no light yet to be missing. It wasn't empty, because the quiet itself was full like a held breath before singing. Out of that quiet drifted a shimmer, not a sound, not a shape, only the faint thought of wanting to be known. That was Daivas, the Sky Father, although he wasn't a father just yet. He had no lips with which to speak, so he hummed his thoughts, and where those vibrational musings touched the stillness converged into form. Nebulas swirled into being, sparks of light appeared against the backdrop of darkness. Giant clouds of gaseous possibility gave birth to stars and voids alike. But soon, what began as a chaotic dance started to form delicate patterns. A single drop of light fell. It tumbled down and splashed apart upon hitting a large flat stone, spreading into roots. Those roots snaked downward, seeking solace in deep waters below, while the branches mirrored upward, pursuing the light of the stars. The tree grew quietly, without hurry, and when it breathed, that became the first wind. And in the hollows where its branches met the air, space was made for new things. That tree would later be called the Austris Cox, the tree of the dawn. And as above, so too below, the roots entwined in the hollows and became like bones. Falling leaves formed into flesh, and tender grass began to spring up like flowing hair. The once silent stone now hummed with vitality. She sighed and stretched herself into hills and valleys, and named herself Zemina. Her stirring moved the world tree, shaking down the first drop of dew from the leaves. It landed in a puddle, and the ripple became a pulse. And from that pulse emerged a figure. He was not born the way people are born. He happened the way a melody happens when two voices hum near each other. He blinked, and by blinking he invented time. He stood, and by standing he invented place. He touched the soil, and the soil rejoiced. Zemina smiled and said, "You are Andojas, the first man, the bridge between breath and stone. You will walk between them and steward the creatures of this world." But in her stretching, Zemina created places both high and low, and not far from the tree had heaved up a mighty mountain. Its lofty peak brushed against the new clouds and took on a mantle of glittering white snow. The bump that shook loose a single drop sent an avalanche rushing down the side of the mountain. It carved a winding river into the landscape, melting and growing in size as it went. When the slope finally leveled out, the uproar slowed and calmed into a wide sea. From the tumult and splashing, another pulse formed to sing a different song. And this tune was Mara, mother of the waters. She swayed, and by swaying she created rhythm. She laughed, and by laughing she created mirth. She splashed the water, and the ocean rejoiced. As she bobbed on the surface, she came to realize that she was not alone. Seeing her playfulness, waves began pushing her to and fro, making her laugh even harder. Having just been born, and not knowing the face of her mother, Mara called this first friend Bangumate, mother of waves. This suited her well, and she was quite glad of it, and so Mara continued to name each new companion in kind. Her sister was named Jurasmate of the sea. The breeze kissed her face, and she called her Vejomate of the wind. With her was Miglasmate of the mist, and above, Lutasmate of the rain. Mara returned the way she had come, and found Upesmate of the river, stepping onto land for the first time, to discover Plava, Lauku, and Mesamates of the meadow, forest, and field, in Avota, their season of spring. All the world was in bloom with color, brought to life by fresh melt water from the mountain. But as she traversed this wondrous landscape, Mara came upon a dark place among the stones. A cavern carved its way into the foothills, and at the mouth of the cave she spotted a figure. Velumate stood hauntingly, and brought her finger to her lips. It was not her time to follow into that cold place. Before Mara could protest, the shadowy figure descended to take her place as queen of the dead, who keeps the long sleep and remembers every name. The worlds above and below. The world was taking shape. Daivas watched from above, but from his vantage atop the mountain, the earth below was shrouded in mystery. He would sneak glimpses of it when the clouds parted, and began to notice Zemina growing ever more beautiful. At first a bashful lover, he began to court her with as much grace as he could manage, putting on meteor showers or flashing northern lights. These wonders lit up her eyes, and she responded with lush forests and waves of grain. In this time alone together, they sang a harmonious tune, and their courtship bore fruit in the form of 2 noble sons. The first was Perkunas. He favored high ground, clear span, and firm measure. Where he passed, ridges stood straighter, paths kept their course, and river banks held. The second was Velnius. He worked close to the ground, in hollows and seams. Where he lingered, roots coiled, burrows multiplied, and ore lay tucked where patient diggers might find it. For a time they walked the land together, and the land learned both habits: hold fast above, work quietly below. Then the differences sharpened. Perkunas wanted lines that stayed true once set, and Velnius preferred arrangements that could be improved by wit, bent, braided, or rerouted. Brothers rarely agree about much, and under the watchful eye of their father all seemed to be unfolding to plan. When the work was young, this made the land interesting. When the work was a bit older, it made it restless. He learned how to change his coat to elude his sibling, a rock when Perkunas looked high, alder when he looked low, an otter when he searched the bank, and a bull when he searched the herd. Each shape he wore naturally, as if it had always been his. Perkunas was infuriated by the disorder. Intent on bringing Velnius to heel, he shouldered his thunder and went out to set things right. He went to a place neither high nor low, wet nor dry, and at that crossroads where the trickster had not yet found a disguise, he found him and called out. Across upland and fen, the chase rode itself into the earth. When Velnius took the shape of a rock, the sky struck, sand fused into glass where the lightning forked. When he was a tree, the sky cracked, and the branches burned clean. When he ran as a stag, the sky billowed and pressed down on him with the weight of the weather. When he donned the quills of an egret to hide in the swamp, the thunder split the fog and drove him toward open ground. But nothing ever held him long. The younger slipped through with the calm of someone who knows every loose board in each fence. At last they came to a wide grotto where the cold water echoed back the thunderclaps. Velnius did not take a body there. He let the hollow speak for him, attesting to the merit of his craft, the kind of work that goes unpraised. Perkunas stood above with rain in his beard and law in his bones. He could have thrown again, but he did not. His fury was spent. So a boundary was settled. Velnius kept the underworld, and the labor that grows by resting, seed and furrow, ore and seam, and the careful ledgers of the dead. Perkunas kept the overworld, and the order that is kept by oaths spoken, promises kept, and the steadfast maintenance that builds things to last. And by both of their efforts, our lives are made much richer. The forging of the sun. Above all, Daivas watched, but he could not see far, for the world was illuminated by faint starlight and the occasional flash of lightning. He wished to look upon the splendor of creation, and of course gaze upon the beauty of Zemina. He needed a star bigger and brighter than all of the others. To make it, he needed sure hands and a hot fire. He reached deep into the cloud banks, where thunder had been hoarding its strength, and drew out a figure shaped of smoke and iron, Telievelis the smith. His eyes were coals, his beard was ash, his voice, when it came, was the crack of flint. "Forge me a warmth that the world can feel," said Daivas. And Telievelis made a pilgrimage to where the mountain's ribs met the cauldron of lava. When he arrived, there stood Gabia, keeper of the sacred hearth, born of the very molten core. Only she knew how to drive the fire from red to white, from white to the color that has no name. They raised a forge there and gathered precious metals from deep ore veins. They worked together, each in their own way. Gabia fed the coals with breath and bellows, with oaths and embers saved from older nights. The flame growled until it sang. Taliavelis set to smelting a strange alloy, copper, gold, and amber. Under that heat they fused inside the crucible. Taliavelis poured and hammered until the metal resolved itself into a single form, a gleaming crown. He loved it at once. He loved it too much. Pleased with himself, he rushed to test it out. He climbed to the heights and set the crown in the cold, thin air, among the fixed lights. For a while the sky blazed. He beamed with pride, and turned to report the good news to his partner. But the heat bled into the dark, and the nearest stars softened and slid loose, streaking from their places. The heavens wept sparks. The crown dulled. Disappointed but still confident, he brought it back to the forge to heat it back up and try again. He then hung the crown in the upper branches of the world tree where clouds gather. For a while, morning was white gold, but the clouds started to shrivel. Leaves crisped at their tips. The plains cracked with drought under the oppressive heat. After some time, the crown dimmed, but not before wreaking havoc. Irritated, but still determined, back to the forge he went, and Gabia stoked the fire. He ferried the crown to an island and set it on bare stone to shine over the water, thinking the reflection would diffuse the glow softly. For a while the coast gleamed. Then the tide around it began to boil. Fog rose in thick shrouds, and fell away as scalding rain. Reefs blanched, fish ran for the deeps. Again the light went out. Again he returned, chastened and stubborn. Between these trials, Gabia was preoccupied. Alongside the crown was born a living fire, not so different from her own emergence from the bosom of the earth. She carefully gathered it from the forge with a coal shovel, gave it a little brazier for a bed. It laughed in little licks when the coals were fed. It learned. It waited when the bellows rested, as if listening. By the third night of failures, that living flame had the outline of a young woman beside the hearth, quick, sure, golden at the edges. She warmed the room with her presence and lit it up with her smile. Gabia adopted her as her own. When Taliavelis dragged the crown back again, grumbling with frustration, he didn't notice the ladies at all. Still smitten with the crown's perfection, he could only think of places he hadn't tried yet. Gabia gestured between the crown and the girl with her tongs, beseeching him to acknowledge the connection, but he was too lost in his own thoughts. The hearth daughter stepped forward and reached out to touch the crown. It flashed, nearly blinding him, and that was enough to see what was right before him. The smith understood at last. The crown made rays. It was not the sun by itself. It was the way the sun would shine. He reheated the metal one more time, clean, bright, singing. He lifted it ceremoniously and set it upon the brow of the hearth daughter. Calley stood there, no longer a byproduct in the corner of the forge, but through love and care became the heart of the sun, with her crown of rays shining brightly. Where she turned her face, color flooded into the world. Ashamed of his short-sightedness, but not yet fully free of it, he asked where she would like to dwell. She shook her head and said, "I cannot rest while this world is cold, for my heart is warm, and I wish that for all. As my fire was kindled, I will spread this light. When the sun shines down, it should shine down on everyone." Taliavelis was moved by her nobility. As Gabia had nursed her as her own, he too resolved to foster the light of the world. He shaped a golden chariot for her to drive across the sky, and made it clever. With a tap, it became a silver boat for the return voyage. And it may be that he built her a palace, perhaps even two, but who can say where she sleeps at night, if she even does at all? The Abduction of the Sun and Moon. When Calley illuminated the world, the dark moon, Menes, reflected her light. He had long lurked in the shadows, but his handsome radiance could now be seen by all. Adoring the attention, he beamed, and wandered the night looking for love. High in the branches of the dawn tree, Lima kept to her hall of clouds. She worked at a loom, warping it with days, wefting it with chances. From up there she could see everything, connecting the thread of each living thing to the creation around them. The web of life, invisible to all but her, shimmered with a subtle beauty, catching the light of the stars. But above, a light she had not seen before caught her eye. The moon sailed serenely by, and at once she desired to touch it. She stood up from the loom and moved over to her spinning wheel, where strands of fate were brought together into the thread of history. Ignoring her charge to never abuse this power for selfish aims, she spun a net to ensnare the object of her desire. The invisible threads crossed the heavens and took more than she had hoped for. They caught Menes, and they caught Calley. Day failed, and the land cooled. Ice crept down from the foot of the mountains, and the rivers slowed. Leaves forgot their green, and travelers lost their roads in the darkness. Lima went down to claim her prize, and panicked at the sight of the blazing sun, working quickly to try to contain the collateral damage. Rather than cut her free and risk her rallying allies, she smothered her with fiber, swallowing her brilliance up with the cloak of invisibility. Thinking the matter was solved, she hauled them both back to her tower. In the quiet forge valley, Telliavelis and Gabia saw the light go thin. When calling brought no answer, they looked up and saw the last faint rays get wrapped up in the net. They immediately acted to come to their daughter's aid. The smith began to forge a mighty sledgehammer to break her free from the prison. Gabia slipped into a smaller shape, a cat, clever and sure-footed, to seek out allies of the sun. She ran through the fields, calling for help, attracting the rooster to crow with valor, the horse to sally out with haste, the goat to bleat with determination, the snake to slither with wisdom, the ram to charge with courage, the loon to guide with sincerity, the bear to lumber with endurance, the swan to glide with grace, the wolf to howl with wild strength, the stag to leap with agility, the crane to stand in balance, and the fox to prance with cleverness. Gabia led the dozen warriors back to the forge, where Telliavelis awaited with a starry chariot and weapon at the ready. He drove them upwards toward the place where the light had flickered out. No sign of either sun or moon remained in that cold void, but a cool glow emanated from the tall tower bridging the great tree to the heavens. Upon arrival, they found the fortress impenetrable. The rooster crowed out to his beloved son, and they heard her stifled cries high up in the tower. Enraged but determined, the team worked together to strike the base with heavy blows from the sledgehammer. The stone foundation moaned and cracked, losing integrity with every strike. Finally, the whole tower came crashing down, scattering gleaming chunks of stone forcefully upward. They became a pale sky river called the Bird's Path, which now leads flocks home on their long voyages. The moon snuck out into the darkness and quietly took his place in the night. The animals worked quickly to untie Calley and safely escort her out as the tower fell, and Telliavelis scooped up Lima in his chariot to present her to Divas for judgment. The Sky Lord sized her up coldly, disapproving of her disruption of the celestial order. But perhaps this ordeal had been a twist of fate for the goddess herself, and he sensed within her the seeds of her own penance. Her time in the ivory tower was over. She was sent below to walk among mortals. From her union with Menes was born Melius, the love child, and her journey into motherhood would crown her as midwife. She went on to protect women and their babies, and guide them through life with a loving hand. She often walked in rags to watch her prophecies play out, and reward dutiful parents who put the love of their children above the fickle sway of fate. And it is said that if you hear a cuckoo bird, she might just be watching you. The world rejoiced at the son's return. To guard his daughters going and returning, Telliavelis built her 2 strong dwellings, a silver castle set upon an island in the far east, where she takes up her road at dawn, and a golden castle far to the west, where she anchors her chariot at day's end and washes her horses in the sea. To ensure her safety, Divas assigned twin sons, the Diva Deli, to escort her across the sky. And to reward the heroic efforts of the zodiac, they were immortalized in the sky to tend the wheel and ensure it would always keep turning. The Battle of the Seasons. The world was still young, and Calley's light, though beautiful, was wild. The long daylight hours were beginning to take their toll, bleaching the land. Creatures took refuge in caves and dark places to hide from the scorching sun. Whispers of rebellion spread in cool winds from the north. Witches listened and were mustered to the North Star, where the mysterious crone Regana resides on the highest peak. Her hair is the color of ash, her eyes the deep blue of frozen wells. Where she wanders, leaves turn from green to yellow and red. Rain turns to snow, and the air smells of blood. Where Calley burns, Regana cools. Where Calley rushes, Regana waits. The world cannot do without either of them, though it fears them both in excess. During midsummer, when the fields are lush and the fruits are swollen, Regana sends her first warning, a cool mist that creeps in and lingers a little bit longer each morning. Calley feels this chill as she rests her horses by the western sea. "Not yet," says the sun, stroking the mare's hot necks. "The world still dances." Unaware of the toll her radiance has taken, the parched earth cries out for rain while her heart still burns. But Regana has already begun her work. A whisper of relief comes from her cooling winds, and the oppressive heat of solstice tempers. Beasts now walk unhindered, while the snakes still bask on stones. During autumn, she gathers her coven of sisters from their caves, the night women with pale hands, and sends them creeping across the marshes. Wherever their fingers touch, dew stiffens into glass, the frogs fall silent, and the hayfields shiver. Furious, Calley leaves her chariot burning at the rim of heaven and steps down onto the frost-bitten field. Her bare feet turn rime to steam. "Witch," she calls, "I've humored your creeping long enough." Regana appears at the wood's edge, quiet as snowfall. "You've had your season," she answers. "The earth longs for sleep." Her army of cold maidens reveal the strength of their numbers. A hush falls over the world, and Calley routs to find aid of her own. Ximena withdraws underground to hibernate. There, she and Calley take counsel with their host, Velnius, and strike a pact. The living light will not go alone against the dark. When the sun wanes and the veil thins, the dead remember their names. On All Hallows, the gates stir. Velnius musters his silent ranks and sets them in order beneath the frost. The long night gathers. Winter solstice comes like a held breath. Regana rides with her wind witches, sweeping the fields clean of path and landmark. Velnius answers from the barrow mounds, a tide of ancestors moving like smoke over snow. Perkunas lifts his axe at last, not to shatter, but to sound, and the strike is a drum the dead can march to. Calley's crown flares behind the clouds, and the lines meet. The witches break first. Regana stands. Velnius offers terms. Queenship below, not as a prisoner, but as a keeper of the quiet country, while the world above remembers the road back to spring. She accepts with a thin smile. Winter will have its due, but it will keep its place. So the dark months proceed under treaty. The dead are counted, named, and gently herded home to the barrows as the weeks turn. Regana rules Vinsaule with measured hands. Velnius tends to the ledgers. Ximena sleeps and gathers strength, and when the last of the hosts has gone below and the paths are clear again, Calley takes up her traces, warms the furrows, and the world remembers color. One voice was warm as flame, the other as cold as stone, but they both learned the oldest lesson: nothing lasts forever. Every day the sun must rest, and every year the sun must retreat, not out of weakness, but out of compassion. Forging the bonds of high marriage. By the rhythm of the sun and moon, the cosmos hummed along in beautiful harmony. The master smith sought to bless the partnership of his daughter the sun and her consort the moon. He chose to forge rings because a ring holds 3 qualities that are echoed in the bond of marriage. The heat of the forge, it endures pressure and survives it. The craft of the work, the bond grows strong through dedicated effort. And the shape of time, it begins where it ends. On the inside of every ring, he cut 12 notches to mark the months, and 4 deeper bites to hold the quarters. When 2 rings are pressed together, their grooves line up, year touching year, vow touching vow. He made 5 such pairs of magical rings, and presented the first set to Calley and Menes at their wedding. Their union brought forth beautiful daughters to join them in lighting up the heavens. The eldest daughter was Vaivora, Mercury, who became her wisest adviser, and whose rainbow ribbon flashed beautiful colors as she waved to Perkunas when he rode by on storm clouds. The second daughter was Ausrine, Venus, whose radiant love never left her side, from morning until evening. The daughters to follow were Zestra, Mars, Andria, Jupiter, and Celia, Saturn, who took after their father as guardians of the night. Every day, Ausrine wakes up at the crack of dawn to milk her cows. Her song stirred roosters to crow and shepherds to make their rounds. With Gabia, she prepares semolina porridge and pudding for breakfast. The warm scents gently rouse Calley from bed. When ready, Calley mounts her golden chariot, and the Divadelli yoke their horses to it. Ausrine lights her torch and opens the gateway to the castle, signaling the start of their journey. After the day's arc across the sky, the party stops at the Nemunas River, near the western sea, to bathe their horses. Then, Calley and Ausrine bathe themselves at a nearby hot spring, before reaching the Golden Castle in the far west by nightfall. They rest there until midnight, when they board Calley's copper boat and ferry the underworld river back to the east. When they return to the Silver Castle, Ausrine personally tucks Calley into bed, and the cycle is repeated again. Apart from the daily cycle of the sun, there is a yearly cycle of marriages on the 4 solstices and equinoxes, corresponding to the 4 other pairs of rings forged by Teleovelis.